by the way, that craziness you just heard as an intro, that music was a trio that was myself and Mike Gallaher, who's a fantastic player, guitarist. And this was from my Nashville days. The drummer's Chad Hunley was another great, great drummer. We collaborated on a lot of my early stuff, 1990, 98-ish, through about 2002 or so. But Mike and I had a duo gig in the Nashville area, Princeton's Grill, which was a great little restaurant, had great food, and it was a duo thing. So, sometimes as a bassist, when you're playing in a duo context, it's a little more difficult because you have to be also the timekeeper, not that you're not anyway, but it does make you super aware of that and maybe having to add a little more, be a little busier in terms of trying to keep the groove happening. But we had a great time, blast for probably 2 or 3 years doing that gig. And it was one of those things where, the gig only paid for the duo and you got a meal every night. And so it was great food. It was a lot of fun. A lot of people came out. A lot of people dug seeing Mike play because he's such a fabulous player. And you can look him up. I'm sure he's got stuff all over the place, whether it's YouTube or, on Facebook. But many times they wouldn't pay for a drummer. And I, many times was going, man, I wish we had a drummer so we could stretch out a little more. And there wasn't so much of the time depending on me staying in that role. It's good opportunities to solo and all that stuff. So drummers, many drummers in the area would come out, friends of mine or friends of Mike's, and just guys in the area that knew it was a cool gig. They would come out and play for free, and they'd get a meal, of course. We did manage to make sure they got something to eat for their time, but it was one of those cool gigs. And so that's what you hear at the beginning is a little late night session we did, I think in Franklin, Tennessee, one night after a gig we had played, and Chad many times would come out and play with us as well. So it's not perfect, but I mean, it was just raw stuff. And so I'll try to interject some of that through some of these videos at different times. I have a few of those tracks that we recorded. Some of them were pretty long-winded because we were just basically jamming, there might be some structure, but mostly it was just us kind of playing freely with each other and bouncing and interacting with each other. So that's a long-winded explanation of the intro at the front. So, hey, folks, this is going to be probably a pretty long dialogue for me, in and out, done at different times for my series called How Does It Feel? And again, what we're attempting to do is to kind of give you an idea of what it's like when you approach a new piece of music, first time maybe seeing a chart, first time maybe hearing a feel. And in a lot of these examples, we don't have any other harmonic content other than what I'm providing. So all you're hearing is a drum track or a drum loop and the feel of that. Some of the genres or styles we'll discuss, maybe a potential pattern that you might play. I think one of the important things to remember in all these cases is you have to draw upon your experience and your having heard many of these styles and trying to grapple with what's going to be the most appropriate way to make it authentic. Even if you're not a player that plays all the time in, specific genres. For instance, for me, I love salsa, but I've only had a few really, really authentic experiences with other salsa players. But I can definitely emulate what I kind of tend to say is a bastardized, version of that style. and get close and get, what you want to do is get close to some of the patterns. You do need to be familiar with a couple of things like that. That's the same thing for Latin music. A lot of times in Latin, and we're talking, specifically about things like bossa novas, rumbas, I don't know, maybe a beguine, sambas, there are a lot of different sort of genres within that genre, and it's pretty typical for like a bossa nova. If you're playing, if you got, you hear that bass, so you're basically kind of playing that pattern of dotted quarter, eighth, half note, or or quarter note, boom, bum, that kind of thing. And then the same thing kind of applies to sambas. It's just a little faster. So you kind of develop these things as a part of your vocabulary for different styles. And when you hear something that feels that way, then you kind of tend to go that way. It's the same thing with straight eight things or with swing. You get certain patterns that you start to be able to utilize. But the more you increase or enhance your vocabulary, the more you have to draw from. So my recommendation, above all else at this point, really is if you want to be able to walk into either a session or to a rehearsal with guys that you're learning material, whether it's cover or it's original, and you have different styles that you're doing, you need to immerse yourself in the masters of those styles. Nowadays, that's pretty easy because you can do a search or you can go on YouTube and you can hear just about anything you want to hear. So, just do a search on salsa, do a search on, Latin feels, jazz, swing, there's a million things out there, so it's just a matter of kind of doing a little bit of research on it so that you're somewhat prepared when you sit down and either see a chart or get together and you're hearing something for the first time. So a lot of what you're going to see here from me is just initial stuff, and it's not, a lot of the stuff is not directly recorded. I mean, it is, but it could possibly be from the room here, where I'm going through an amp. To give you that kind of flavor. And some of what you see is the process of me that's an evolution sometimes. For me, just going, okay, what's going to work? And I might fumble with something, and the same thing happens in studio sessions, And where you are able to be worth your weight in gold is if you can walk into a session and be confident about almost any style relatively authentically and quickly come up with the right part. But, a lot of times the art of that comes from having that experience and playing with a lot of other players and different styles. Being a rhythm section player is always, as I say, a very eclectic thing. You have to be able to adapt constantly. Thankfully, I've been able to make a career of this. One of the most important elements is to be able to interact with other musicians and play in many, many, many different circumstances. One of the advantages, even though it was slower in a learning process than nowadays you're able to do, because you can go on and see almost anything, whether it's information about scales or modes or what works on jazz changes, how to improvise, all that stuff is just out there on YouTube and everywhere. And so it's invaluable as a wealth of information, to give you more vocabulary. But you have to have a situation or an outlet to be able to apply it, which means you got to interact with different musicians. I've said many times, playing with different drummers, it's different. It can be, you may have to adjust and tweak a part that you normally would play just to make it feel right with a specific drummer. Maybe his kind of a perception of the time or a specific feel is just a little bit different, or maybe yours is different, and he's got to adjust to you. So that's part of the the thrill of live playing. You just don't know what's going to happen. And there are certainly situations where it can be the greatest bass player, the greatest drummer, and they get together and it just doesn't work. Sometimes that happens. But anyway, my recommendation is to, immerse yourself, absorb, let all of that, all the different genres and styles kind of seep in and become part of your musical DNA, so that when you hear this stuff, then you'll know where to go with it, or what to start with in terms of an approach for what you're playing. So I hope that in some way this is helpful. There may or may not be as much detail as you would like on some of this stuff, and so comment to me and let me know what you think I need to improve upon or give you more information about. This is gonna, like I said, it's gonna be just me kind of going in dry with any kind of drum loop I happen to throw up or pattern, and trying to come up with something that starts to feel right. And so, like I said, there's a couple of them that you'll see. It's like an evolution of the beginning of me trying to find an idea and then finally locking in on something that I think might work. Now, that's just instrumentally with, the drum loop that you hear and me. You start putting harmony over it, and then starting to put a vocal melody over it, and that may change things too, because one thing that you want to be aware of as a bass player is to not step too much on that vocal. You've got to create that time and that groove, both harmonically and rhythmically with the drums, but you don't want to be filling so much that you're stepping all over certain vocal lines. So that's another whole skill and art that we will address at some time. But this is just an intro to a number of different fields. So I hope you enjoy it, and see you next time.